Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's take up the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by taking up an article from the front page of the Delhi edition that highlights the preparatory steps that India has been taking to roll out a COVID-19 vaccine as and when it becomes available. Even as vaccine development efforts are going on in India and around the world, India has already begun to take a few preparatory steps in order to put in place the required logistics to handle the need for mass procurement, storage and distribution of the vaccine. When a COVID-19 vaccine becomes available, if it has to be administered effectively in a time-bound manner to every citizen in the country, then what is needed is an effective procurement, storage and distribution mechanism. And arranging this in a short span of time is nothing short of a logistical nightmare. So for putting in place effective procurement, storage and distribution channels, the central government is trying to work with the state governments, and it has already begun to take a few preparatory steps to put in place these required logistics. For this purpose, under the Union Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, an expert committee has already been constituted by the central government, and it is currently in the process of coming out with a blueprint that would provide the required guidelines for the state governments. Because when a vaccine becomes available, the state governments will play a key role in ensuring the effective distribution and administration of the vaccine. So for arranging such massive logistics, you need a solid infrastructure in place that can effectively tackle the challenges in procurement, storage, distribution and administration. Fortunately for India, such an infrastructure already exists in the form of the immunization program run by the Government of India, and the expert committee is already looking to tap into the infrastructure of the country's existing immunization program. Along with this, the expert committee is also looking to make use of the infrastructure and the manpower that can be brought in by the private players as well. So this pooling together of infrastructure and manpower with the coordination of the center and the state governments might help India to put in place the required logistics for ensuring the effective distribution and administration of a COVID-19 vaccine. So for this purpose, the expert committee has already issued a set of guidelines that have to be followed by the state governments and the union territories. As per these guidelines, states and union territories have been asked to constitute a committee under their respective chief secretaries, so that when a vaccine becomes available, this committee under the chief secretary of the state can provide for time-bound implementation. Then the expert committee has also directed the states and the union territories to create a database as per the blueprint that has been issued by the center in order to map out the existing infrastructure and logistics. But more importantly, the center has directed the state governments and the union territories to not come up with any isolated parallel plans of their own. States and UTs have been strictly directed by the center to adhere to central directions, because any parallel efforts by the states will lead to duplication of efforts, and it would not only result in wastage of precious resources, but it could also make the vaccine distribution and administration program non-uniform and ineffective. Hence, the center has made it very clear that state governments cannot make their own isolated parallel plans for the administration of a possible COVID-19 vaccine. Now let's take up a column from page number 6, which advocates divestment as a strategy to squeeze funding for the fossil fuel industry. See, divestment is a process through which the money that has been invested in the bonds and stocks of a company is withdrawn by the investors. It also refers to the blocking of financial resources such as loans and credit to the company. Now, if a company is resorting to certain unethical practices, then the civil society led by NGOs and other organizations could lead a sustained campaign against such a company in order to push and motivate the investors and the banks to cut off funding to such an industry or to such a company. One such successful divestment campaign was seen in South Africa during the anti-apartheid movement of the 1990s. In this campaign, companies that were openly promoting racial discrimination were targeted by the campaigners, and under this pressure, a number of investors from around the world and even banks, they were motivated to withdraw their investments and to stop further funding to such companies. This of course included the South African government as well, and it was this financial pressure which played one of the key roles in putting an end to apartheid and racial discrimination in South Africa. So currently, a similar model and a similar campaign is being carried out by a number of civil society organizations and NGOs from around the world in order to target the financial resources of the fossil fuel industry, which is directly contributing to climate change. Popular civil society organizations and global NGOs such as the Rainforest Action Network, 350.org, Go Fossil Free, People and Planet, and others have been leading a strong divestment campaign against a few fossil fuel companies, along with the support of students, universities, and other like-minded members. This campaign is particularly targeted against those fossil fuel companies which are not adopting any changes in their strategies, and instead of making an attempt to switch towards renewable forms of energy, these companies have been noticed to continue expanding their fossil fuel portfolio in direct breach of their commitments under the Paris Accord of the Climate Change Convention. The writer specifically points out that there are several fossil fuel companies and even countries which are encouraging the expansion of the fossil fuel industry in direct violation of the Paris Agreement, with absolutely no concern for the environment and the climate, and they have shown a consistent disinclination towards the adoption of renewables. The writer points out how the revenue of certain fossil fuel companies has gone up exponentially over the years. Take for example Saudi Arabia's Aramco, which is owned by the Saudi government. Its revenue in 2019 has touched almost $111 billion. Similarly, many Chinese companies, American companies and European companies, they are openly breaching the commitments of the Paris Agreement with the support of their governments, and they have not taken up any efforts towards switching towards clean renewable forms of energy, and they have continued to invest in expanding their fossil fuel program with the support of certain vested interests within the industry and within governments. So against such companies, a divestment campaign is being carried out by a set of civil society organizations and NGOs, and they have already convinced a number of large investment funds to withdraw their investments from such fossil fuel companies, and they have even motivated few banks to stop financing the expansion of the fossil fuel industry by providing loans and credit. As a result of this ongoing campaign, a number of large investment funds such as the World Council of Churches, some large pension funds from France and Australia, the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, Rockefeller Brothers Fund, and several other universities including the Columbia University have already announced a withdrawal of their investments from the fossil fuel industry. As a result of this campaign, around $11 trillion has been withdrawn in investments from the fossil fuel industry in 2019 alone. So this ongoing divestment from fossil fuels, as a result of this environmental campaign led by civil society groups and NGOs, is putting a financial squeeze on the fossil fuel industry, and it is motivating them to switch towards renewables and uphold the Paris Agreement commitment of limiting global warming to well under 2 degrees Celsius. See, available data shows that banks such as JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo and Citibank of the United States, the Barclays of United Kingdom, the Bank of China and others are the leading sponsors of the fossil fuel industry of the world. They are not only financing and encouraging the extraction of traditional fossil fuel resources, but they are also sponsoring its expansion to exploit the resources present in the Arctic, and they are also known to finance controversial methods of oil extraction such as fracking. Reports show that between 2016 and 2019 alone, around $975 billion has been provided as loans and funding to the fossil fuel industry by banks around the world. So this ongoing divestment campaign is targeted at such banks which are providing easy loans and credit to the fossil fuel industry despite its unethical practice of not heeding to global climate change commitments and for not switching towards renewables. The writer thinks that this pressure tactic seems to be working because recently Goldman Sachs withdrew its funding to a new oil drilling project in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. While this might appear to be a drastic action, the writer justifies that such pressure tactic is needed to put pressure on the fossil fuel industry, which is not paying any heed to the impact of climate change and global warming, especially on the vulnerable communities. The writer also argues that this drastic divestment campaign does not apply for India. Why? Because India's contribution to greenhouse gas emissions is still very minimal, and the per capita emissions for an average Indian stands at less than 2 tons of carbon dioxide per year. Compared to such low emissions from India, in large economies such as US, China and other developed countries, the per capita emissions are many times higher, And in the US, the per capita emissions are somewhere around 20 tons of CO2 every year. So the writer argues that such a drastic campaign may not be necessary for India as of now, because India has shown a firm commitment towards switching to renewable forms of energy. Whereas she justifies the ongoing divestment campaign against some of the global oil majors that are backed by their respective governments, because according to her, such financial pressure is needed in order to force these companies to abandon their approach towards fossil fuel and create a disincentive for the production of fossil fuels, thereby creating an incentive for the adoption of renewables. Now let's take up a column from page number 7 that evaluates the lack of academic freedom in India. See, in the latest Academic Freedom Index, India has scored a dismal 0.352, and it places India in the same league as that of authoritative countries such as Saudi Arabia and failed states such as Libya. In fact, the report points out that over the last 5 years in particular, academic freedom in India has declined. And according to the writer, this is one of the core issues that is plaguing the country's education system. See, on one hand, the government has brought out the National Education Policy, which seeks to overhaul the education system. It envisions to establish India as a global knowledge superpower, and it proposes to establish a new system of education through which India can seek to achieve its targets under the Sustainable Development Goal number 4 of the United Nations. SDG 4 is related to the provision of quality education, and in line with these commitments, the National Education Policy seeks to ensure that there is universal access to schools for all children, and it also promises to raise the gross enrollment ratio in schools in order to bring more children under the schooling system and ensure that they are retained within the schooling system by drastically reducing the dropout rate. While these provisions of the NEP are laudable, it is quite concerning that it does not make any mention of academic freedom and the consistent erosion of academic freedom in the country. See, by definition, academic freedom is nothing but the freedom enjoyed by the scholars, the teachers, and the faculty members to teach and discuss any controversial topic, irrespective of its political and cultural complexities. But however, in India, it is becoming increasingly difficult to discuss and teach controversial topics without having to face the fear of a backlash. For example, take our analysis of the daily newspaper. Every time we come across controversial topics related to the Kashmir dispute or India's border tensions or the concern about rising religious extremism and fundamentalism in India and as well as around the world, we need to be extra cautious, and sometimes maybe we need to avoid these topics entirely. And this fear of a backlash severely restricts our academic freedom to discuss any controversial topic in an objective manner. Such academic freedom is absolutely essential for teachers and scholars, especially to promote critical thinking among students. Interestingly, the National Education Policy lays down an objective to promote the creation of an education system where creativity and critical thinking are openly encouraged. The NEP does mention that education in the country, be it school level education or higher education, it should be entirely free from political and external influence. It also provides the faculty with the freedom to decide upon the teaching and pedagogy methods as long as it is within the framework that has been prescribed. But unfortunately, the NEP does not talk about academic freedom and does not contain any provisions to protect academic freedom and prevent its further erosion. However, it needs to be appreciated that the National Education Policy does provide for the establishment of a National Research Foundation, which would function independently from the government, and it is supposed to be a merit-based, peer-reviewed organization in order to determine how scholars and teachers can approach controversial concepts and topics. But the poor ranking of India on the Academic Freedom Index makes it clear that declining academic freedom in the country is a direct result of rising political tensions and polarization in the Indian society. The polarization that is happening on the lines of religion, caste, and nationality makes it very difficult for universities to function independently by resisting government interference. Unfortunately, in India, the setup of universities is such that government interference is all prevalent in both academic and non-academic matters. The government plays a direct role in determining the syllabus, the examination pattern, the scoring methods, etc. It also plays a direct role in non-academic matters such as administration of universities and institutions of higher education. In India, the government plays a direct role in the appointments of the Vice Chancellor and other key officials and office bearers of a university. These appointments usually tend to be political appointments, thereby creating immense scope and opportunity for the government to directly interfere with the functioning of a university. That's the reason why a number of academic experts feel that Indian institutions of higher education have become highly bureaucratized, and hence there is an urgent need to de-bureaucratize them if we have to promote creativity and critical thinking among students. Now let's take up an article from page number 10. The 2020 edition of the Malabar Naval Exercise has begun in the Bay of Bengal. This multilateral naval exercise has taken off with the participation of navies from India, United States, Japan and Australia. See, the Malabar Exercise was launched as a bilateral naval exercise involving just India and the US back in 1992. This signaled the improving defense cooperation between the two countries, and over the years it has become a very important defense engagement between India and the US. But in 2007, India made an attempt to elevate this bilateral naval exercise to the multilateral level by inviting other like-minded countries such as Japan, Australia and Singapore, which also had similar stakes and concerns in the Indian Ocean region. But the hosting of this exercise by India involving these countries angered China, because China saw this as a formation of a military alliance against Chinese interests in the Indian Ocean. Due to China's strong response, India decided to scale down the multilateral exercise back to the bilateral format involving just India and the US, because at this point, India was looking to cultivate good relations with China without allowing their border dispute and their strategic conflict to derail the larger bilateral relationship. So in this interest, India heeded to Chinese concerns and it scaled down the Malabar naval exercise back to the bilateral format just involving the United States. But post 2010, China started becoming very aggressive against India with regard to its border dispute and as well as with regard to their strategic conflict in the Indo-Pacific region. This increasing aggression and assertiveness of China pushed India in 2015 to again bring back Japan to the Malabar naval exercise. And following the latest round of clashes in Ladakh, India has also decided to invite Australia from this year's edition of the Malabar exercise in order to send out a strong message to China. Officially, this exercise is designed only to promote interoperability amongst the four navies in the field of maritime security, disaster management, counter-terrorism and piracy. Officially, these four countries have denied that the Malabar is a military alliance against China. But however, one cannot miss the complementary nature of the quadrilateral grouping and the Malabar exercise involving these four countries, because the stated objective of the Quad is to establish a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region that is directly targeted against Chinese aggression and assertiveness in the region. So a number of experts have come to believe that the Malabar naval exercise might very well become the military arm of the quadrilateral. Then the article also mentions another exercise of the Indian Navy known as Mission Sagar. See, under Mission Sagar, the Indian Navy has been providing assistance to a number of friendly countries spread across the Indian Ocean region, especially at a time when these small countries have been facing numerous challenges as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So as soon as the pandemic broke out and countries around the world went into a lockdown, the Indian government launched Mission Sagar 1, under which the Indian Navy successfully delivered food and medicines free of cost to a number of important countries in the Indian Ocean region. This mission went on for nearly 2 months between May and June 2020, and through this initiative, India managed to reach out to a number of friendly countries in the IOR region such as Maldives, Mauritius, Seychelles, Madagascar and Comoros. So as an extension of this outreach to friendly countries to help them out during the COVID-19 pandemic, the Indian Navy has launched Mission Sagar II, particularly to help a few African countries that are closely connected to the Indian Ocean region. This includes Sudan, South Sudan, Eritrea and more importantly, Djibouti. See, as an aspirant, you need to note that this outreach of India is not just a friendly outreach on humanitarian grounds, but this is also a strategic outreach. The objective of Mission Sagar is clearly designed to enhance India's soft power influence and goodwill across the IOR region, which in turn will help India to counter the rising influence of China across the IOR region. So if you take Maldives, India has a strategic defense relationship with Maldives. Then look at the other IOR countries that were reached out under phase 1 of Mission Sagar. It included Mauritius, Seychelles, Comoros and Madagascar as well. India has been giving a lot of priority to these countries of the Indian Ocean region as a part of its Sagar doctrine, and it is also important to note that these countries are part of a regional grouping known as the Indian Ocean Commission, to which India recently gained the observer status. Then under Mission Sagar II, the Indian Navy is reaching out to few other countries that are closely connected to the Indian Ocean. This includes Sudan, Eritrea and Djibouti. These countries also occupy strategic locations as they are present along the Red Sea over here. Then you have the Bab el-Mandeb Strait over here, which is a strategic choke point. And this is the Gulf of Aden Horn of Africa region, where both India and China are vying for influence. Amongst all these countries, India's reach out to Djibouti in particular is very important because China has established its first foreign naval base in Djibouti. Now let's take up the practice questions for today. The pardoning powers of a governor are enshrined in which article? The correct answer is Article 161. Option A is the right answer. The presidential powers of pardoning are contained under Article 72. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 1, the Supreme Court has ruled that the governor of a state can rule on the pardon plea of the convicts in the Rajiv Gandhi assassination case, as the governor is empowered to grant such pardon under Article 161. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? A cold wave is a weather phenomena that is distinguished by a cooling of the air marked by a rapid fall in temperature. In plains, a cold wave is declared when the minimum temperature is 10 degrees Celsius or below and is 4.5 degrees Celsius less than normal for 2 consecutive days. In India, a cold wave is declared by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Amongst the given statements, the third statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. The third statement is incorrect because in India, a cold wave is declared by the Indian Meteorological Department and not by the Environment Ministry. This question has been asked because according to this article on page number 2, the IMD may declare a cold wave in the northern parts of India as a result of the unexpected drop in temperature which fits the definition of a cold wave. A cold wave condition is essentially an extreme weather event because it could easily turn into a disaster and kill a number of people if adequate precautions are not taken. Now let's take up the next question. Which of the following statements are correct? Khudai Khidmatgar was a predominantly Pashtun non-violent resistance movement known for its activism against the British Raj. It was based in the central provinces. The movement was led by Abdul Ghaffar Khan. Amongst the given statements, the second statement is incorrect, so option D is the right answer. See, the term Khudai Khidmatgar roughly translates to servants of God. It was predominantly a Pashtun non-violent resistance movement against the British Raj that was founded by Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was also known as the Frontier Gandhi. He was known as Frontier Gandhi because he was championing the Gandhian principles in the northwest frontier province of British India, which roughly corresponds to today's Afghanistan and Pakistan. That's the reason why the second statement is incorrect, because the Khudai Khidmatgar was basically operating in the northwest frontier province. This question has been asked because we have an article on page number 5 that makes a reference to the Khudai Khidmatgar organization. Now let's take up the next question. Fortified rice that the government is planning to distribute to school children contains iron, folic acid, vitamin B12. All the three are correct. Option D is the right answer. This question has been asked because according to this article, the government is planning to distribute fortified rice as a part of the Mid-Day Meals Scheme and the ICDS program in order to combat chronic anemia and undernutrition that is widely prevalent among school children in the country. As a part of this program, rice would be fortified with essential micronutrients such as iron, folic acid and vitamin B12. This program will be implemented with a special focus on the 112 aspirational districts of the country. Prior to launching this program, the center ran a pilot program in a few states by working with the Food Corporation of India, Niti Aayog, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, several NGOs and even private players and the World Food Programme. The objective under this program is to grind rice into a fine powder and mix it with these essential nutrients and then reshape it back to rice-like kernels. And these kernels, which are fortified and enriched with essential nutrients, they would be mixed with regular rice, which in turn would be used in the midday meal schemes and the ICDS program. Now let's take up a question from the 2016 prelims paper. Consider the following statements. The new development bank or NDB has been set up by APEC. The headquarters of NDB is in Shanghai. Amongst the given statements, the first statement is incorrect, so option B is the right answer. Because see, the NDB has been set up by BRICS, not by APEC. It has been set up by the BRICS countries as a counter to the World Bank. The objective of the BRICS countries is to challenge the Western domination of global financial institutions such as World Bank, which is dominated by the United States. It is also opposed to the domination of the IMF by the European Union, and hence the BRICS has established counter institutions such as the NDB that rivals World Bank and the contingent reserve arrangement that rivals the IMF. Finally, let's take up a couple of mains practice questions. The first question, discuss the preparatory steps that India is taking to roll out a COVID-19 vaccine as and when it becomes available. The second question, one way to undermine the activities connected with elite networks of the fossil fuel industry complex is to take aim at their finances. Analyze. Kindly write an answer to these questions and post your answers in the comment section below. So this concludes our discussion for the day. Thanks for watching.